Welcome back to Killer Cure, and we're particularly welcoming back Bill Liao, who took a bereavement leave, but we're really happy to have him back and excited about this episode. Seed, we are really focused on early disease detection, prevention, and even reversing the disease. And on Kill and Cure, that's our focus. We're at the frontier of tackling those things, and I'm really excited for our guest today, Matthew O'Connor, who goes by Oki. We're going to ask why in a minute, but his background really speaks towards our whole mission. He's invested his lifetime in just detecting processes that will reverse chronic disease, particularly in arteriosclerosis. And we're super excited to talk to him and hear about his background, what's been happening with his company, Cyclarity, and really dive in to hear all the details about how he's going to reverse heart disease and create more longevity for all of us. First, Oki, can you tell us where that came from and maybe a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah. So I think for my birth year, the name Matthew is the maybe the most common first name for American boys, and so
It
growing
wasn't
up.
Todd? Wasn't Todd? I thought that was. I'm kidding. Sorry.
It maybe for both of them, they're one of the top five most common names, right? So happened that there were a bunch of Matthews running around my middle school when I was growing up, and so kids twisted my last name into Oki Connor and then shortened it to Oki, and I thought, hey, that doesn't sound so bad, and it'll distinguish me from all the other kids with my same name, and so I've been going by Oki ever since.
Amazing. Well, we'll utilize that a bunch today. And you are obviously a doctor. You've spent your days in research, and you're the CEO of Scientific Affairs at Cyclarity Therapeutics. You're the former VP of Research at the SENS Research Foundation. And really, with all of that background, you've committed your life to extending life. And I want to hear how you got that started, how you got that passionate, and how you really dove into your knowledge base and are going to change the world for us.
And before you go there, our Irish listeners are going to want to know, what part of Ireland is the O'Connor from?
I was the last time I went to Ireland, which was about a year ago, I got stopped by customs and asked the same question and got chatted up by the customs official and wanted to know because my middle name is also Sean, spelled the Irish way, which they could see on my passport. So the answer is I don't really know. The family lore is that from County Cork, where I've never been. But
and we're coming to you from right now.
Yeah, I've always wanted to visit. I've never been to County Cork. I'd love to visit someday, and I'd love to see if it's true and track down my heritage a little bit more closely and see if I could find some of that out.
Ireland is going to want to reclaim its long lost son once Slutty works.
I love Ireland, and I'd love to spend more time there someday. It's such a beautiful country.
And particularly Cork is going to want to reclaim you.
Really? Okay. Well,
I want his eco farm for both of us, Oki, if we want to go spend time. I think it's a great place to kind of have our next meetings.
Okay, let's make it happen.
Yeah, I love
that.
Okay, so how'd you get into putting a stopper in death?
Yeah, so it's basically what I have always wanted to do. I was going through my angsty teenage years, deconstructing everything and trying to decide who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I came to the conclusion when I was 16 that aging was the world's biggest problem. It was the most inevitable problem that was causing the most trouble and damage to humanity, and decided to dedicate my life to it. So I decided then and there that I was going to go and get a PhD in biology and study aging and see what I could do to use that knowledge to come up with therapies to help people. The result of which is, as Todd was saying, is chronic disease. So aging leads to chronic disease, and so the research that I've done is leading to hopefully to treatments for chronic disease.
And are you surprised? Like, think back to when you first entered college. Are you surprised, looking back then, at where we are today technologically? I mean, it has been quite a remarkable uh, set of changes that have come about, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, speaking from my 16-year-old self, it's gone way too slowly. Like, I thought I could change the world in 5 years. But looking in hindsight to, say, when I started graduate school, the world has completely changed in that time. Even just the topic of aging research wasn't a real field. I mean, you had gerontology, kind of the study of old people, and, you had some people studying aspects of aging, but this idea of gaining a deep understanding of the aging process and actually intervening in it and using the knowledge that we gain from that to create therapies, starting companies around intervening with aspects of the aging process. I mean, there were basically none back then, and now there's very many. There's too many conferences to attend. You can't go to all of them in a year, unless you're a full-time conferencier. And it's a huge field. And, there was a time when I thought I knew everybody in the field. And now I meet new people all the time. And you can't keep up because it's growing too fast.
Because it's burgeoned, how do you filter out all the snake oil that's out there? Like, do you encounter a lot of snake oil?
I do. It comes, from a few different directions, and it comes more from the marketplace direction. There's always aspects in academic research of people trying to hype their own research and maybe going a little too far with their claims. But I think the true snake oil comes from people trying to sell things that have little or no scientific basis. And there's a good amount of that going around, and we need to be wary of it and make sure that our claims and the things that we're bringing to the public are actually valid and based on science and reason. But also, it's a difficult line to walk because we don't want to be too cautious and qualify everything that we say and not take any chances, and make reasonable assumptions based on the way that we believe things are likely to be working.
That's actually spot on. When you start to think about it, all of the noise around anti-aging, longevity, the public awareness of it, it's an important thing, right? Aging is what ultimately kills us in the end, right? So cutting through the noise for us is a massive thing. I think that when you started this journey, right, back in the lab, 16-year-old, I'm going to change it in 5 years. What was the thought process? And did you, there was no noise then. You were creating your own pathway, it seems. There weren't hundreds of people. Everybody wanted to live longer. What was your real driver that said, okay, we're going to create science-backed, direction around how we create? Was it aging, or was it curing that chronic illness that you knew would actually reverse and bring back aging? Which was first for you?
For me, it's always been aging. So even when I was creating the lead drug for Cyclarity, which is currently going to be tested on coronary artery disease, it wasn't that I set out to invent a drug to treat cardiovascular disease, to treat heart disease. It was that I was looking at an aspect of aging, a kind of molecular damage that accumulates with age, which is oxidative damage. And in this case, it was when you have a free radical that damages cholesterol. And so there's a kind of cholesterol that's not the classical good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, HDL, LDL, but oxidized cholesterol. That accumulates all over your body. It accumulates any place that you have cholesterol and oxygen. It happens slowly. It's not a directed process genetically or anything like that. It's basically just entropy happening to your cholesterol. And your body evolution didn't give you any tools to process this. And so it just accumulates in different cells in your body. So I was thinking about it in a much more kind of fundamental pure science problem kind of way. Before, I was thinking about what are the best earliest applications for this technology, and then once we started to develop the technology, started to think more carefully and strategically of what kind of diseases might this be most effective for, the easiest and the fastest and the most dramatically, what could help the most number of people the fastest, that kind of thing.
Amazing. So the science drove how you could actually get to the biggest result. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And that happened, maybe start with the timeline of the journey, because 16 to, potentially changing the world and the impact that you've gone, there's a huge, probably ups, downs, and sideways type of journey that we'd love to hear about, because there's probably there were a bunch of mountains to climb all along the way. So maybe give us a little feedback on perspective on timeline of that, so to where you are now.
Sure. So, I got my education. I went to graduate school, and during graduate school, I saw a lecture on oxidized cholesterol, and it was with a very small number of people, and it basically said that oxidized cholesterol ultimately leads to the cascade that creates plaque in your blood vessels, that it's a fundamental aspect of aging that happens that leads to this. So I've actually been thinking about this problem for about 20 years. Now, I haven't been working on it that long, but that was my first introduction to it. I assumed, having seen this lecture very early on, that everybody knew this. And it turns out that this is not common knowledge, and not widely assumed to be, driver of disease. But I've been thinking about that for a long time. So 10 years later, you mentioned that I was at SENS Foundation. I was there for 9 years. I was the first PhD scientist hired by the foundation. I was running, first just my own research project. It was actually on a different topic, on mitochondrial aging. And but I just kind of naturally started giving advice on other projects, being asked for guidance on other projects that the foundation was funding internally and externally. So the foundation, for anyone who doesn't know, the SENS Research Foundation, which is now the LRI, the Longevity Research Institute, merged with another organization recently. It funds research internally at the Mountain View Research Center and externally elsewhere. And so I eventually had oversight over all the research projects, one of which was looking at oxidized cholesterol and trying to break it down. And so I spent more time than usual overseeing that project. There was a lot of enthusiasm around it, but I started thinking about it in a different way, because we were doing this kind of fancy enzyme engineering to see if we could develop these perfect enzymes and then put them into human cells, which was a really beautiful and elegant basic research project. But I started to worry that we were working on a 50-year translational research project rather than something that in a few years or 5 years could be start to get developed into an actual therapy. So that's when I started thinking about it seriously myself and went back to the literature and started trying to find ways that could be easier, could be hacks, if you will, to try to get rid of this toxic oxidized cholesterol with existing tools and not having to completely invent totally new tools and totally new types of matter. And that's what led me to the research, which eventually led to a breakthrough, which created the technology that's the basis of Cyclarity and our first drug, which targets oxidized cholesterol.
Amazing. So the science and thought process and understanding and identifying the compound that we needed to attack was kind of that first phase. Then the next was the technology catching up to where you were in the thought process, or what really kind of led to that breakthrough and the timing of that?
It was, a lot of the research that I leaned on to develop this was done in the in the 1980s and the 1990s. So some of it was just sitting there waiting for somebody to come along and put some pieces together. So we've certainly benefited from some technological advances in chemistry since then, and we've benefited sort of ancillarily from more evidence coming out about oxidized cholesterol and its involvement. So oxidized cholesterol has been implicated in heart disease since the 1990s, but it's only the last 10 years that really good clinical data has started to come out. So we had a lot of evidence that this was true 20, 30 years ago, but now we've got more things that will convince more people, clinicians, cardiologists, stuff like that. And we've got tools now that are serendipitously have come along that are just helping us enormously. So even when we started Cyclarity, when you were when you wanted to measure plaque in somebody's arteries, it used to be an invasive procedure where you would stick a wire up through, into somebody's groin and run it up to wherever in their body, usually into the chest, that you think there might be a blockage, and then take pictures of the blockage. And that was just, 6 years ago, that was basically the gold standard. And now we're in a world where non-invasive imaging is completely taking over and is about the same quality as the invasive, but you don't have somebody who has to have a cord run up through their body. It's gotten cheaper, it's faster, it's safe, there's no discomfort. So that technology has just exploded in the last 10 years, and especially in the last 5 years, and it's still moving really quickly. And so that came along like right at the right time for us, and that we had nothing to do with. So, I guess a number of things came together at the right times. And, maybe if we had tried to do this, 5 years earlier, it would have been too early, and everyone would have thought we were crazy, and we wouldn't have had the tools that we needed to be successful.
That non-invasive measurement, I think we've talked about on the show before on Killer Cure. It's a CT angiogram that has allowed for you to actually diagnose heart disease without actually being invasive to the body and having recovery time and very low complication rate, very low risk. But unfortunately, there's a lot of growth still yet to come. I have one of those every year. I'd say very few people do. And it's important to proliferate that technology, but even more important to reduce and break down this poisonous plaque that calcifies and causes the risk, right? So I want to stay focused on that today. And really, when you think about your process, maybe, and there's been tremendous news, right? You've now gotten Cyclarity listed in the top 100, really targeting, anti-aging. It's proliferating a lot, and you've really moved the ball forward. And maybe the process of how you got here, and then from there, let's talk about how the drug works, and then where we are today as far as the clinical trials and how long is somebody in the world going to have to wait for this, right? Hopefully not long, right? That's the idea.
Yeah, we're going as fast as possible. We started the company about 5.5 years ago. Spun it out of the foundation. We invented the core technology at the foundation, and did some of the proof of concept, and then raised in 2019 money to launch the company, to hire a small team, and pick the lead drug candidate, which means the drug prototype that you're going to make a conscious decision to put it through the regulatory process and turn it into a drug that you're going to ask for permission from regulators like FDA to take into people. So we made that that decision. We had that breakthrough before we started the company with the technology, and then we tested a few candidates in the first year of the company. We did a lot of the foundational work before we officially launched the company, and because we knew that we wanted it to be that kind of technology and therapy, so we started treating it as kind of as a drug development program before we even launched the company. And so in that first year, we developed, we chose our lead candidate and started the somewhat long and costly process of proving to ourselves and to the regulators that it would be safe. We needed to scale the manufacturing up from being able to make milligrams of the material up to being able to make kilograms. So there's a lot of chemistry that needs to be done to do that. And building a global team, not just of our small group of people, 10 people who've been working on this for the past 5 years, but 100 or 150 people around the world who we collaborate with, consultants, all over the world. So it's become a real global effort, and leading up to today, we're actually running our first in-human clinical trial in Australia, which is a great place to run early stage clinical trials. And so we've got a team there running our phase 1 now.
You've got one of the leading plaque experts on planet Earth running that trial for you, haven't you?
We do, and I believe that he has the most publications of any researcher in the world on plaque. His name is Dr. Stephen Nichols, and he actually did much of his training in the U.S. at the Cleveland Clinic, where he was basically second in command for a decade of their world-famous cardiology unit, and then he moved back to Australia once he was a renowned cardiologist. He moved back to Australia, where he oversaw the building of the Victorian Heart Institute, which is in and around Melbourne, and the Monash Heart Hospital, which is a beautiful state-of-the-art, very specialized heart hospital there outside of Melbourne that I've been lucky to visit. And so, yeah, he is overseeing our phase 1 trial. He's one of the guys that the big drug companies call to run their phase 3 clinical trials to get their drugs approved. He's working on a lot of the Lp(a) efforts now, leading those. So it's actually, we're really, really honored to have somebody like him running our phase 1 trial. So it's his group actually running our phase 1 trial. He's advising us regularly. He's on the head committee that approves every step forward in the trial. So Steve Nichols has been an enormous asset to us, and it's a tribute to our team and to our technology that somebody like him is interested in it. And I actually had dinner with him about a week ago, and we were talking about, we were making plans for the phase 2 trial. And he was talking about what we needed to do to be successful at getting it done, having it be well organized, having it happen at multiple sites around the world. And he said the key is that you have to get the doctors at each site, the doctor who's going to be in charge of each site. Say you're going to have a site in wherever in San Francisco or Miami. You might have one in San Francisco, you might have one in Miami, you might have one in Melbourne, you might have one in London, right? So you'll have sites all over the world, but at each site you're going to have a doctor who's going to be in charge. And he said you really want to get all of those doctors really excited. And what we have here is something new and exciting and interesting and different from what they're seeing. It's not just another cholesterol lowering drug. It's not just another blood pressure lowering drug. They're so bored of testing these tiny incremental differences that are basically all the same as each other to try to get, another copycat drug on the market. They're hungry, cardiologists are hungry for something new that can really move the needle. And he said that's why this is going to be really exciting for them, and why, that's our trump card that is going to set us apart and make us successful in our next phase of the clinical trials. So yeah, he's a real.
I think you'd easily find a lot of doctors of high caliber who could be excited in India, given the massive increase in heart disease in that whole continent.
Yeah.
You probably get a grant just to have a trial site there.
Yeah. You're right that cardiovascular disease, heart disease, and atherosclerosis in particular is really huge in India and in people of Indian descent. And I hear that a lot when I talk to Indian researchers, investors, business people. It's definitely really exciting. So yeah, we're looking at it right now. We haven't looked into getting grants or India specific funding yet, but that's a good idea, Bill.
One thing.
Okay.
One thing I looked at the other day was an analysis of the efficacy of red wine in providing better health outcomes, right? And I looked at that analysis, at that meta-analysis, and it surfaced something that I don't think a lot of people talk about. Certainly the wine industry doesn't talk about, which is that the place where red wine has the highest correlation with better health outcomes happens to be France, where healthcare is extremely high quality and free. And so that's probably just a result. All of the positive data is probably just a result of the confounding fact that that French healthcare is just better, and everyone has access to it.
Interesting.
Have you seen other confounding things in your journey, especially around heart disease, where people have been just given bad advice, and now we know better?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a good one. The so-called red wine paradox and the French paradox, and and you're absolutely right that I think that's finally being put to rest, and we're realizing, to many of our disappointments that drinking lots of red wine is probably actually bad for us, not good for us. Yeah, eating. For many years, it was believed that high cholesterol mostly came from eating cholesterol in our diets. And it turns out that the story there is a bit more complicated. And I don't want to get into the whole thing, but basically, that's not the main cause of high cholesterol, and people shouldn't be beating themselves up for it. But it is true that eating a diet high in saturated fat causes your body to make more cholesterol, which tends to correlate, to your point about correlation, that tends to correlate with foods that are also high in cholesterol. So that's why researchers were genuinely confused for so long about what was actually going on there, because there's a good correlation between eating a high cholesterol diet and having high cholesterol. But it turned out that the mechanism was more complicated than simply you are what you eat.
You make what you've ate.
It's definitely more complicated. I think one thing that leads us to, if you think about it, is two things. One, what does this drug do that others haven't? So, and whether it's drinking more red wine, reducing cholesterol, those effects. If you just think about it, what does this do that a statin doesn't do, or that a PCSK9 inhibitor doesn't do? And I say that because a lot of people that listen don't know even the technical terms of it. So, and maybe in a layperson's term, what does this compound do differently?
Sure. So what statins and other lipid-lowering drugs, PCSK9 inhibitors, do is lower the bad cholesterol, which is LDL, or low-density lipoprotein cholesterol. So in in layperson's terms, like it's called the bad cholesterol, but it's actually the recycling cholesterol. You need it to send cholesterol around your body. So for the most part, your brain doesn't make its own cholesterol. Your liver makes cholesterol for your whole body, and it uses LDL cholesterol to distribute it to your body. Now, when you're taking cholesterol lowering drugs, you're trying to lower that bad cholesterol, but you can't lower it to zero, right? You're trying to lower it into a sweet spot because you absolutely need it to survive, right? Just like with blood sugar, right? There's a sweet spot for blood sugar, and there's a sweet spot for cholesterol, and so you're trying to get things into a medium zone. But getting things into medium zone, whether it's sugar or cholesterol, doesn't mean that if you just because you have good blood sugar, right in the perfect zone, and good cholesterol right in the perfect zone, that doesn't mean that you're not gonna die of anything. It doesn't mean that you're not taking damage from having the passive effects of sugar in your bloodstream, which are always causing damage, and that plaque isn't going to grow in your blood vessels and cause damage, or that you're never going to have a heart attack or a stroke. You're absolutely still likely to die of one of those things. What we're doing that's different is going after a target that's completely useless, and I think that is in pharmaceuticals, when you're thinking about drug targets, I think that's an ideal drug target. When your optimal level is zero, you can't really get rid of too much of it, and so in theory, if you build the perfect drug that only targets what you are building it to do, then there will be no side effects, and the patient will just be better off. That's kind of my vision for how medicine can really go to the next level, is by carefully picking targets, like in this case, oxidized cholesterol, which is totally useless and toxic, and it builds up slowly with age and causes a lot of problems, in your blood vessels by causing plaque. In your brain, it leads to brain aging, to dementia. It's involved in Alzheimer's disease. And so if we can get rid of it, you'll just be better off. That's my vision of what is different and transformative about the approach that we're taking, which is what I would call a damage repair approach. The damage accumulates slowly. Let's fix it. Let's get rid of the bad things. Let's put back in the good things, and you'll just be healthier. There shouldn't be any trade-offs.
I mean, what you're talking about is the human body equivalent of putting in a better oil filter. Like you're putting in a drug that takes out the accumulated garbage that naturally builds up from running the engine, and that we just happen not to have a very good oil filter installed from spec, and you're upgrading it, right? You're allowing our kidneys to do a job they've never done before, which is filter out broken, bad, rusty cholesterol.
Exactly. Yes. You put it perfectly well, Bill. Is that we're flushing the bloodstream with this drug that's kind of like a sponge that will only grab onto one bad thing that you don't need. It'll pull it not just out of your blood, but out of every place that the drug can get. It'll pull it out of plaque. To pull it out of cells and tissues, and like you said, you'll just put it through your kidney, you'll pee it all out, and it'll be gone. And it's really is a simple. There's not with a lot of drugs. There's like many metabolic steps of what they go through, and the drug will change, and what they're grabbing will change. This is quite simple. We deliver the drug. It grabs on to to the piece of rust, like you said, and it floats away with it, and you pee it out, and we can measure it. We can measure it in your pee and make sure that it's working.
It sounds like a perfect solution, and simple is good in healthcare. And you think about drug efficacy, and if it does one thing and it does one thing really well, that's super exciting. If I'm I'm a guy who has heart disease in his family. My mom had chronic heart disease at a young age, so we track this really carefully. It's an important topic for our own longevity. If you're talking to somebody that doesn't know, right? You've already said CTA, and looking and knowing what you have and measuring the plaque you have is important. You're on a trail where, the clinical trials are beginning, right? The first in human safety trials. So what's the timeline that you see, and then that this will be potentially available, number one, and then two, what does somebody do in the meantime, right? How do they manage the risks of heart disease? Because just like you said, just because you lower your cholesterol doesn't mean that you don't have plaque building up in your arteries. And that's a big thing, right? Nobody that even the American Heart Association didn't acknowledge until recently. So what do people do? You're a scientist. Maybe you can help our audience and even me.
What do you do?
Yeah, what do you do to prevent? That's great.
The news isn't fantastic. So, what do I do? I mean, it's mostly, diet and exercise. So, I eat, a diet that's not super calorie dense, that, tries not to eat tons of processed foods. So trying to eat, whole foods, fresh foods. I don't eat red meat. That's kind of a borderline decision about whether or not that makes a big difference with cardiovascular health. I think it probably makes a little bit of difference, and that may be different between different people about whether or not that affects your blood lipid levels. Mine are pretty good. And I do some testing like you were talking about before, Todd. I look at, my LDL, make sure that it's not too high, that it's in the sweet spot. I'm not yet taking any lipid lowering medications, but, keeping an eye on those things, making sure that my triglycerides are in the right level in addition to cholesterol. Getting, preventative testing done, and then, exercise as much as I can, and, and hope that we get better treatments before it catches up with me and everyone else, right? Because you can't stop it right now. The best you can do is slow it down with diet, exercise, of course, not smoking, extremely limiting your drinking, if not, completely abstaining from alcohol, sugar, refined sugar, should be out of your diet as much as possible. And then, doing the testing. And if your cholesterol is high, you need to, do something to get it down. And then looking at, some of the next generation things like the LP little have been tested for that. That's a genetic thing. If you have familial hypercholesterolemia, you should be on a lipid lowering drug. Those are the best you can do right now. And then, if you get bad news on an angiogram, then you might need to get surgery. That's kind of the best options we have at this point, which is kind of sad.
The one thing I'll add to that is be proactive. And that's what resonates. You're being proactive about your diet. You're being proactive about your exercise. You're being proactive about any diagnostics that you do to make sure that if there are indicators that you're aware. I believe today nobody should die of a heart attack without knowing they had heart disease. Currently, there's just too much technology that enables us to diagnose that. And if you are proactive about it, you should be able to at least manage it and not die of a chronic event, and be able to have surgery, have fixes happen on a more proactive basis as opposed to reactive. So I heard a lot of proactivity in there as your response, and I think that's super relevant to everyone, and that's great. Thanks for the thoughts. As far as our pathway with this direct targeted approach to taking an attack simplified to taking out a compound that kills us. What other areas do you see in the long run that this could be done? Because that's not how most drugs work, right? They're more broad spectrum or different types of things that affect a lot of cells and a lot of other molecular positions. So is this unique to what you've done? And is that something that can be adapted to a lot of other directions?
Yeah, I would kind of break my response to that into two pieces. One is how can we use the very specific technology that we've developed at Cyclarity to go after other targets, other toxins that build up in our bodies with age, and then more broadly in the kind of damage that accumulates with age, and what are other approaches that others or that I've worked on in the past. So I can give some examples of both. I'll start with what we're doing and things that we can use our technology for. So anything that's kind of small molecular junk like oxidized cholesterol, there's lots of things like that happen just as byproducts of like Bill was saying, running the engine and having gunk build up that our bodies aren't perfectly constructed to deal with. And so there's another thing in the eye that's a byproduct of retinal, which is like the eyesight molecule. And it turns out that the eyesight molecule can kind of mutate and turn into a mutant version of that is toxic and builds up in your retina with age. And so we're working on building a drug that could grab that the same way that we have a drug that grabs oxidized cholesterol, that can grab that mutant retinol, pull it out of the eye, and flush it out of the system, doing the exact same mechanism of action using similar technology. So we're using computational modeling to try to build virtual prototypes, and now we're synthesizing. We've done that, and now we're synthesizing real prototypes, chemicals that we can do laboratory tests on. Another aspect that a lot of people are becoming aware of is plastics and the molecular plastics. So what a lot of people are thinking of microplastics, but we're actually going after nanoplastics, which are the building blocks of these contaminants that we have now in our modern world. So obviously that's not a natural aspect of aging, but it's something that all of us are being exposed to as we age now in our modern world, where plastic is everywhere. It's in our water, and we eat and drink out of plastic. So we're constantly introducing this stuff into our bodies, and now it's becoming a problem that medicine is going to have to deal with. So we're working on technologies to try to grab that and flush it out of the system. So that's a couple of examples of things that we can use our technology for. Much more broadly, yes, I think that this is like that the damage repair approach is the next frontier of medicine. We're running into a glass ceiling of how many more different types of blood sugar and lipid lowering molecules can we come up with before there's no more progress to be made in chronic disease. And the next frontier is to break through that and say, what is it that's happening in the aging process that's causing your brain to age, your blood vessels to age, your heart to age and break down. And so you start looking at things like senescent cells, sort of zombie cells that build up all over your body as you age. So there's research groups that have worked. I actually worked on cell senescence when I was a graduate student 20 years ago. And there's research groups all over the world that have been working on this problem now for a few decades. And now there's companies that are developing drugs that are called senolytics that can kill selectively senescent cells and get rid of them so that you can then replace them with healthy young cells. And the flip side of that are stem cell treatments, right? And stem cells can replace lost cells. So we know now that the density of cells, for example, in your skin goes down as you age, and so those need to be replaced with fresh skin cells. So there's a lot of things that need to be fixed, but I think that this approach of killing off the bad, useless cells, replacing them with good ones, getting rid of the molecular junk that you don't need so that it doesn't gum up the works. I think that these kinds of approaches are going to be transformative in medicine in the decade to come.
I think that's a very key insight, is that there is perfectly natural trash in our bodies that accumulates over time, and some of that trash we just have no way of throwing out. And so if you could take out the trash, whether it be a senescent cell, or whether it be a mutant retinol, or whether it be 7-ketoglycerol, you're taking out the thing that actually is then the core of a bunch of other problems. And you're not going to harm the person doing that, because we've got no use for the trash. Like, even a hoarder knows that it's not good for them to hoard.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's fundamental to the aging process, and you can't prevent this junk from building up. These senescent cells with healthy living. You might be able to slow it down a little bit. It's just going to build up, but if you get rid of those, you're just going to be better off. You don't have a use for these things, and you can heal afterwards. You will be better off. You're right. And there hasn't been enough yet done in humans, but we've already been able to test a lot of these things in mice and seen that mice are better off without having this junk building up in their bodies. There's not a downside to getting rid of this stuff.
One of the things that's exciting to me is mRNA technology. And everybody seems to be hung up on mRNA as, we just have this new thing for making a vaccine. You mentioned before that if you could exquisitely design an enzyme to take out a piece of trash and get it into the cells, that would be powerful. Given that with mRNA, you could feasibly have the cells make that enzyme in situ, well, isn't that going to be a super exciting way of treating a whole lot of these diseases as well?
Yeah, it's taken way too long for some of these technologies to mature, but you're completely right, Bill, that we could be designing new enzymes, and I've worked on this, researchers all around the world have been doing enzyme engineering for a while. But a lot of the question has been, how do you get so now you've created some completely new enzyme that the world has never seen before in a test tube. How do you get this into a human body? You can't just eat it. It'll get broken down in your stomach. And now we have this new mRNA technology that we can use to deliver new engineered proteins. So all enzymes are proteins. And so just like the proteins that are being used in vaccines, you could use mRNA technology to deliver new enzymes to human cells and distribute them through the body and put them to work, breaking down their very specific targets. So yeah, you're right. That's a great tool that has come along that we can use.
That would mean that you could make an mRNA, for instance, that makes lactase, so that people are no longer lactose intolerant. They just take that mRNA once a month or something, and their lactose intolerance goes away.
Yeah, or you could build it into a gene therapy and put it into them permanently. I've seen that proposed as well.
I think people are more scared about making a permanent genetic change. But mRNA is kind of a really good halfway house, isn't it? Because, if it works, great, and if you don't like the results, you can just stop.
Yeah, and it'll go away. You're right. I mean, when you do a gene therapy, there's a permanent there's a temporary kind of gene therapy, but when you do permanent gene therapy, it's permanent. You can't take it back. And so, like many people, I'd be really, really cautious to make permanent changes to my genome without being extremely, extremely confident that I was going to be better off. Such as if I had a a rare disease mutation, I might make that choice. But if it's something, just like lactose intolerance, do I want to, get a viral gene therapy or something to deal with that, which could have risks. So you're right. You get an mRNA therapy, and if you don't like it, the effects will go away in somewhere between days to a few months.
And male pattern baldness is a single gene knockout.
I hadn't thought of that. That you might be able to do a mRNA therapy for baldness. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if anybody is working on that. I haven't heard.
I bet you they'd make a lot of money with it.
Yeah. Especially if they could make it topical. That's interesting.
I just have to prove to a lot of people that I'm not saying that, because the hat is for baldness, right? It's
keeping the hat on. Those are all good things. I think it's interesting to hear applications across the subjects. Bill's right. People don't look at it as favorable discovery. It's a hugely favorable discovery. There's a lot of outcomes that'll come out of that. So it's an exciting time to see where we're going. So question for you, think about where we're going. When this drug works, what does the world look like 10 years from now if that happens, right? So you're going to reverse heart disease completely in theory. And that's what the indications show. And tell us, what do you think the world, what will we be doing harm to ourselves with after that is the question.
Well, yeah, we want to be able to have the first therapy short of having, like a surgery to, doing bypass surgery, right? Right now, that's the only way to get rid of plaque is to go in and cut it out. And, obviously that you need to be in a pretty extreme case, and that's an extreme intervention. We want to be able to deliver a drug that will actually make the plaque melt away, and that will be transformative. It'll be so transformative that it's going to be hard for regulators like the FDA to come up with rules on how to approve drugs that work like our drug, and and others that come along, whether they're copycat drugs or actual novel therapies that are aiming to impact similar things. So I think we're heading for a world where we need to come up with new and better ways to measure chronic disease, to have biomarkers and diagnostics that we can use to mark when we're sick, when there's something going wrong, and how to measure when we're fixing it. So I think that there's going to be a lot of development there at all levels, from, the way that you interact with your physician, the way that you're, reading your own blood test results, the kind of tests that you're getting are going to change a lot. And then we're going to have to keep innovating and keep fixing more damage, because there's more damage, there's more things that can harm your heart. Your heart is basically it's basically a water pump. You think about your car's water pump, it's just pumping liquid around your body, and it will wear out. It's not just oxidized cholesterol that will damage it. It will not last forever. So we need to figure out ways to either fix it or replace it. Swap it out with a mechanical or an organic version, that we grow in a vat or something. There's all kinds of work to be done on the heart and on the blood vessels. Changing the blood vessels will be way harder than changing the heart. You think it's crazy to get a new heart. It's even crazier to think about replacing miles and miles of blood vessels that you have running throughout your body. It's completely impossible. So we need to figure out ways to fix and maintain those as we move forward.
That's actually super insightful. It's like changing the engine versus every hose in the car. Not to
exactly. Changing every hose in your car, while it's a daunting task, it would be way easier than changing every vein and artery in your whole body.
Yeah, that is 100% true. I like the outlook because if you can't measure it, I think the measurements of where chronic disease detection is going and the biomarkers and where innovation's happening, I think is really going to get better and better and better. The computing power getting better. The one question I read in the news this week that the FDA launched their own AI program to interpret submissions and so on and so forth. Should we be concerned about that? like as a scientist, you think about it. It's a big transformation.
I have to answer that one a little bit, because this is something I do as an investor now every day. Is when I want to form an opinion on a piece of advanced research, I go to Google Scholar and I download a bunch of papers from Google Scholar, and then I go to a mini model, a mini AI model, and I just feed it the papers, and then I ask it natural language questions just about the contents of the papers that I've selected. And it could be a fairly large number of papers. And boy, is it powerful at reading through an enormous number of scientific papers and coming up with some really interesting insights.
Yeah, I mean,
favor of it then, I think, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I agree with Bill. Of course, there's, AI will make mistakes all the time. And, if there are things that, that I'm an expert on, that, I'll ask, a generic AI model a question on, and, it's not very sophisticated, or it gets things completely wrong. But it can do things really quickly and provide insights that, that the human mind, that my mind can't hold all in one place. It can summarize things brilliantly well. And so I think when you have scientists, whether they're at companies like mine, or they're investors like Bill, or they're scientists who are reviewing, enormous number of submissions at FDA, if they're being smart about using AI tools to analyze data and summarize data, and then fact checking it, making sure that the AI hasn't gone off on some tangent and is just making things up. I think it's way more of a benefit than a danger. Of course, we're going to run into snags and make mistakes, but I don't know. I'm not familiar at all with the rollout of the new FDA tool. I've seen the headlines. But I believe that it can be a tremendous benefit to them and scientists everywhere. I mean, I use it every day. We use it now to design our new molecules at Cyclarity. We're taking the human out of the process of designing by hand, where to put every atom in the molecule, which is what we were doing 5 years ago. Now we tell the AI, make 100,000 variations on this molecule, run simulations of all of them, and tell us which one is the best one. And then a human looks at it and decides whether that makes sense and does more testing on it, and then we can manufacture a prototype and see if we were right. So I think humans working together with AI can really make magic happen now.
The human.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember. Growing up, and at the time I was growing up in the technology side, looking at nanomachines, and how we'll eventually have tiny little machines that'll go around our bodies cleaning things up. Your drug is a nanomachine. It's been designed to clean up a particular kind of trash. And I find it super exciting that we're at a point where you can actually manufacture this tiny molecular machine that just does one thing and one thing only: take out a specific kind of trash. That's so much progress. In a lifetime, it's like unbelievable progress.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to step back every once in a while and think about things that way, Bill, because I'm so in the weeds, and I sometimes lose track of how, like you said, a few decades ago, this idea that that it was like this concept that we were going to have molecular machines someday, and you're right. Now we've built one that just grabs on to things in a precise way. It's designed and trained to do exactly one job and one job only, and then to go away. And then we can follow it with more and more molecular machines to repair all the different kinds of damage that is building up.
And the batteries are included.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, yeah, we didn't have to power it with molecular energy. It happens. It happens naturally with the attraction for the molecules. But you can imagine, the next generation of things that will actually need to include a kind of molecular energy to power them.
I would argue differently. I would say that when it was synthesized, the fact that it was synthesized with the right energy states in the right places to lock onto the molecule is charging it up. And once it's locked on, it's discharged in some way, shape, or form. It changes I'm sure it changes the charge of 7-ketoglycerol when it locks on.
Yeah, and that's exactly the way that we analyze the data when we're doing the simulations of our molecules is that we look at the free energy states and we look at the charge states exactly, and when you see that energy change shift, you're right, is when you're going from a high energy state to a low energy state, which is the preferred state for matter. So you're right that we're building in the potential energy when we design it and construct it, and then it comes to the low energy state, to the equilibrium, when they bind each other. That's exactly the way that we're doing
when
it.
you build this bear trap, it's built already set. And
Yeah.
it can only be triggered by your dirty, rusty cholesterol.
Yeah, and it'll tend to spit out anything that tries to get in
Yeah,
that doesn't belong there. Yeah, that's exactly true.
Amazing.
I've been thinking about this a while. I'm excited.
It is exciting. I mean, that's one of those big things that we have to think through. That vehicle and that direction, how you focus in on that, Oki, it's amazing, and we appreciate you sharing the story there. We have a few rapid fire questions for you as we kind of near the end here, and we could stay here all day and get you excited. What is the one thing the public gets wrong about cholesterol? I think you touched on it earlier, but want the crowd to know what the one thing everybody gets wrong.
The one thing is that there's two kinds of cholesterol, and one is bad and one is good. It's not that simple. You need both both of the kinds that they're thinking about, and that there's also that there's other kinds of cholesterol, and that the really bad cholesterol is the oxidized form, and there's just nothing good about it.
Good. A book or thinker who's influenced your view on aging, like you were motivated at a young age to fix the aging process. Who influenced that beyond the discoveries you made?
The first book that I read on aging was by the pioneer Leonard Hayflick, who wrote How and Why We Age. And I read that, I think, when I was 16. And he was a pioneer, and he discovered, we were talking about senescent cells, these zombie cells that build up. He actually discovered those in the 1960s. He was way ahead of his time, and in some ways created the field that I work on now.
Amazing. What's the something that you wish other people would understand more about aging, like the process of it?
I think the way to think about aging is through damage, and then in terms of how do we deal with aging or fight with it is. You can do preventative stuff to prevent damage from building up, and in medicine we need to be thinking about how to get rid of damage, how to take out the trash, and that's the next frontier of medicine, I believe.
That's a big one. Who should we have on this podcast next, or in the near future? We have a few guests already lined up. But
wow. There's somebody working on cell senescence, somebody working on mitochondria. Mitochondrial transplantation is really hot. There's a startup in that space now called Mitrix Bio. There's great thinkers. You're talking about enzyme engineering and things like that, and CRISPR. If you could possibly ever get George Church on your podcast, he's just amazing. He's been a mentor from afar of mine for years.
Amazing. Last thing, and one, we really appreciate you being on. I think your story is amazing. The idea that it's been a lifelong journey, even more amazing. And it just shows when you think about your mission and purpose, you can determine that at a young age. It's super impactful, and you can change the world. And you're about to, you probably already have, whether it's completely done or not. You're on the path. How do we follow what's happening with Cyclarity's journey? How do they follow you? We'll put it in the show notes and make sure it's available for people. I think it's important. And what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, we've got our social media and our website, so cyclaritytx.com, and our Facebook page, our LinkedIn page, and follow us on those, and we try to keep everyone updated on what we're doing. And for the scientists in the audience, read our papers. I believe in the scientific process, part of which is publishing your work. Anything that we, there's kind of two different types of companies. There's companies who say, don't publish anything unless you have to, or publish it unless you can't because of some, essential, trade secret or, intellectual property reason. And I'm in the second camp that, we publish unless there's a really compelling reason not to publish something, we publish it. So we've got a lot of great papers on our research and on our technology out there that I encourage the more technically minded people to look up and check out and send me questions about.
I have one more rapid fire question. What is the scariest, most dangerous piece of health advice you've ever heard?
Ooh, wow. Gosh, I'm having trouble deciding, a specific one. A specific one to say, but there's a lot of clinics in especially mostly being run in third world countries right now, doing stem cell therapies of dubious scientific basis, and knowing whether or not they actually have solid standards. There's people offering gene therapies that are potentially could be really transformative, but haven't been super well tested. So I've met people that have taken some of these therapies that I'm pretty nervous about, and people that have encouraged me, and some of these things that cost tens of thousands of dollars. I even met somebody who I know got really sick after one of these cell therapies that they paid, I think tens of thousands of dollars for, and then got better and claimed that, on the upswing, when he was feeling so much better, that was because of the therapy that made him sick originally, which seemed kind of crazy to me. People can talk them into some pretty nutty stuff, and I definitely recommend doing your homework and talking to some level-headed people before embarking on some of these adventures.
And how would you find a level-headed person these days to talk to?
It's hard. The professional advice
right?
is.
I have your number, right? So I just ask you. But how does somebody else listening find a level-headed person?
It's really hard. I mean, ideally, you'd be getting advice, not just from your personal, general physician who's not an expert on anything. They're a super generalist, right? But of course, you want to be talking to your physician, and then if there's a specific condition, there's specialists that you can be talking to. But even them aren't like super sophisticated down into the depths of research. And then there's people like me who are really good at reading research papers. And then there's AI that's good at accumulating this evidence, but needs to be fact checked. So it's not a simple answer, but it's kind of an all of the above. That you want to educate yourself, you want to talk to AI, you want to listen to the experts at the research level, and then you want to listen to the clinicians. And so there's a lot out there, and it can be a lot of work, but I think it's worth it to actually get a broad spectrum of knowledge and opinions.
Two things: be proactive, and actually be the person that actually does the research and lean into that and find people that know. I think that's what I'm summarizing here. That's spot on. I agree with you, Oki. It's a good question. But with that, we're probably near the end here, and I just want to thank you, Oki, for what you're doing and the commitment that you've made for your life and making it better for all of us. And we're excited about Cyclarity's journey. We're excited to be involved and hear what's happening and follow the path of how we really reverse all arteriosclerosis, potentially brain health, all the things that go into that. I think it's just a massive undertaking. So we're going to follow along and certainly support as we can. As far as Killer Cure, we've got great guests coming up with Stephen Ibaraki, Tom Davis, a clinician that's an expert in value-based care and primary care and all specialties. We're excited to continue, and we really appreciate you joining us today.
I had a great time. Thanks so much for having me, Bill and Todd. Great questions and a really fun interview.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.